welcome to another episode of Pokémath. And today's episode, I believe episode number 70, I got a special guest with me where we're going to talk about not the new CPX Top X, but rather the change in the Swiss structure, which I think personally is very interesting as well. So I got a special guest here today to talk to me about that. No other than Jake Gearhart. Good morning to you, or good evening, depending on where you are sitting.
Yeah, good morning to you. Evening for me. Well, very late for me, but yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. I thought, you know what, I need some really, with a lot of insight and do maybe some bit of math and some bit of calculations and some, and I thought, Jake does this all the time. So I thought, you know what, this is a great idea, a great time to get Jake on. So I thought, let's do this, and then we can talk about this new Swiss system. Because as everybody know by now, there's been open your YouTube, open whatever social media, there's been countless of post videos about the new format, everybody's opinion about the new CP bar and whatnot, or not CP bar, Top X, sorry, and all the other changes that are coming as well. I thought, okay, fine, these are some cool changes. But wait, the really important one in my opinion is not the Top X, it's the change in the Swiss system and top cuts. I think that is interesting. What do you think about that, Jake?
Yeah, I definitely think this is the bigger change, the one that'll impact the most people. Well, it'll impact everybody. Anyone trying to qualify for Worlds will be impacted by this, and anyone not trying to qualify for Worlds will also be impacted by this. And it's a pretty major change, has some pretty large implications. And I know you're a fan from the judge side, but I'm not too much of a fan from the players side, I can say.
That is also definitely something. So my first initial take was, oh, as a judge, we have to work less. Fantastic. No, but that's maybe too of a selfish reason. That's not really a good one. But it's always, you look at it like, oh, in general, we have to do less rounds. That doesn't sound too bad. But then again, there's always something to do as a judge. And I've not forgotten my player days. Still playing a bit, but for those who are maybe a little unaware what's going on. So just to give a quick overview here, when we usually play a regional or an internet, say, we'd say just for a placeholder 1,000 players. That's a good number just to have nowadays, or 2,000 even. We will play 9 rounds of Swiss on the first day. Everybody with 19 match points or better will move to day 2, or top 32, whichever is greater. But with such big regionals, it's always 19 match points. And they will play an additional 6 rounds on the second day and then qualify for top 8. That will be it. In the new system, however, and this is where we're going to go and take an interesting look here, because I think I have prepared a little bit for us here. So what we're going to see here is indeed the new system that was announced for Worlds. And here you're going to see, oh wait, with 1,000 players, or 2,000 players just for fun, we play 8 rounds now, only day 1. So 1 round less, but the real big change comes on day 2, where we only play 4 rounds. And the new point cutoff is no longer 19, but 18. So that's the lay of the land. And what was your first take on this, Jake, when you saw this?
Yeah, so my first impression is, well, as far as Worlds goes, it's not too different from past Worlds. I guess day 1, considering you have to go 6-2 regardless in past Worlds.
Fair point.
But day 2 was more rounds than this. So initially just seeing it as like the world structure was like, okay, this is not too different from previous years, but it is a couple less rounds on day 2, and I would have much rather had it be matched to the system that we play for all the other tournaments this past year. But yeah, when I saw that these changes were also applying to regionals, then I had to think a lot more about them and come to some conclusions I'm not too much of a fan of.
No, and that was indeed what the first take was also here. Like, I looked at it first like, okay, just for Worlds, interesting place to test this system, but indeed it didn't deviate too much from the past. Biggest change was Worlds will now be just 1 tournament, because day 1 and day 2 in the past was basically 2 separate events. You were even allowed to change decks if you were ballsy enough to do so that was no problem. But now it's just 1 continuous event like we normally see. And then we thought, okay, this is fine. We're looking at it on screen right now. But then, as everybody also know, it changed into this, or rather, it got expanded into this, which now is for all major events. And now, looking at this, what do you think will happen now, Jake? Like in the first, like when you look at this here, how do you think people will? Yes, it's more difficult to get day two, but will it discourage people maybe to play?
Yes, I think the I don't think it'll discourage like too many people. People probably will still go to regionals regardless of the structure. Maybe if it was best of one, then it might turn away some people or bring in some new people. I'm not sure how that would change, but thankfully we're still playing best of three.
For
So I
now,
think
I guess.
yeah, for now, I think the biggest difference is that just because we're playing so many fewer rounds, you have to change your approach going into the tournament. So one of the main things the main takeaway I have is that it's a lot better to play riskier decks now. Before playing 9 rounds plus 6 rounds day two, you were more likely to hit like close to what the meta share was. So you
Hmm.
always see on the live stream they put up the meta share of what the tournaments, what everyone's playing at the tournament, like be 20% Charizard, 15% Gardevoir, that type of stuff.
Fair enough.
So with more rounds, and if you played an infinite number of rounds, then you'd play against all the decks that you'd see on the meta share like roughly equal amount of time, assuming you're not like the top players will play more of one deck than another, but you're more likely to gravitate towards what the meta share is at the tournament. But with fewer rounds, you're more likely to deviate from that.
Yeah.
So an example would be you always see people posting about these crazy runs where they hit 8 Lugias in a row or something.
Yeah.
But 8 Lugias in a row, that's a lot of Lugias in a row, but it was just over 50% of the decks that they played at the tournament because 15 rounds. And if they played top eight as well, then it was even less than 50% of what they played. But now with many fewer rounds, 8 Lugia in a row is going to be like 70% of what you play against.
Hmm.
So if you really want to play a deck that takes a great matchup to one deck, you could more likely just hit that deck and have a better chance at doing well in the tournament. So it's easier to take auto losses to things, like even if it's like a 20% meta share deck, as long as the top players aren't all on that deck, it's easier to take that risk going into a tournament. And it's worse to play a safe deck that takes 50-50s across the board because you're not taking advantage of that difference that could happen.
I think that's a very interesting take indeed, and also from a pure, say, probability standpoint, like what are you actually going to run into, what are you more likely to play against? Incredibly interesting take on this, and something I don't think everybody have realized this say consequence of the change of the system to call it that. But one other thing I also find was really interesting. So if you look at the new, say, from the update from the next season, you also notice now that day two is not only with 227 players or more, it goes way further down, all the way down to 65 players. This also has impact for our younger divisions, of course. Like they have to start getting used to playing over 2 days in general. Although they did already do so with only top cuts, I believe, or only the finals sometimes. But you now will see that juniors, very likely at every single event as well, because they are likely to be 65 at least in the North America. I also believe in Europe we're up at those numbers consistently. They will play over 2 days. I think that's interesting as well. What do you think for the younger players?
Yeah, I think spreading it out over 2 days makes a bit more sense than combining. So like in the past, sort of you had everything jammed into one day. We were like the old system
Yeah,
was sort of not a traditional Swiss round system. So Swiss rounds are designed the pure Swiss round
yeah,
system,
yeah,
a lot of S's, is designed to create one undefeated player after however many rounds. You take the number of players, it'll give a number of rounds that you
yeah.
need to create an undefeated player. Um, since we're playing a structure where we're not really playing towards an undefeated player, we're playing towards cutting to a top X.
Yeah.
We don't need to match that system exactly. So they had a modified Swiss round system from before, where effectively we maximize the amount of time that we're filling up with games. you play 9 rounds day one, like maximum. If you have as many players as needed to get this, you play maximum rounds is 9 in one day. You have nine day one, and then also 9 day two because you have the 6 Swiss rounds plus the top cut rounds, the 3
Correct.
top cut rounds. So sort of that system was designed to maximize the number of games played in a day because you can't really add the 10th round. Sometimes at some of these regionals, we might have been able to add a 10th round, but it would get messy there.
It would be some
But this,
very long midnight runs. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But this new system is cutting a lot of rounds. So with like juniors and seniors, I think even in the past it would have made sense to split the rounds over 2 days, just because it's easier to play. Like if uh, in their past you play like 8 rounds day one and then only 3 day two
Yeah.
of the top cut, which is a bit unbalanced. So I like the change that it's like more balance between the days.
Mhm.
Um, so if you're only playing 5 rounds or only playing 6 rounds day one, you're gonna only be playing 5 rounds day two. So it's like maximizing the time spent.
I think, of course, so the most people you see online right now are obviously not the juniors and seniors. It's mostly the masters commentating on this. But I think for the younger divisions, this is actually a really good change. I think overall it's really good for them. As you say yourself here, it balances very well between the 2 days. So for the younger division, I think this is fine. I would like to change the attention over to our actually upcoming World Championship. So I swapped back to the Swiss overview just for the Worlds. And there was one thing I always wondered. So the last couple of years, for people who've been on my Twitter, they've always seen this question pop up shortly before Worlds Day 1. And the question was every year. Suppose you play 8 rounds day 1 Worlds. That was a common number for the first day Swiss. Suppose you were now 5-0 and you needed to go 6 x2 or better to qualify straight for day 2. Remember, day 2 was a separate event. That is, everything got reset and you started over. It was just about getting over the hump and get into day 2. Then I asked players, if you were 5-0, would you ID 3 times in a row? And very few would do so. I think if you look back, maybe 20% would do so. And then I asked a follow-up question. Suppose now you're 5-0-1. Would you then ID twice to get in? And then we got up around a coin flip, which was very interesting. And then, of course, we moved up. Suppose you're 5-0-2, would you ID in? And then it was basically unanimous. Yes, of course you ID in because there's nothing to lose. Suppose you now take this setting, sorta, and we put it over here. We're now day 1 Worlds. We are, say, just for the heck of it, we are 1,000 players. That means that we play 8 rounds day 1 and 3 rounds on day 2. I think that's also my own personal guess we're going to be playing at Worlds, but I guess that's a little besides the point. Not sure exactly how many people show up. But suppose now, Jake, you play Worlds. You're now 5-0 on the first day. Congratulations, well done. In order to get to day 2, you need to go x2. That means you need to win the last game. Would you ID 3 times at this point? I think not, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
Because it makes no sense anymore, because you want to carry over some points. Now let's change it a little bit. Now you're 5-0-1. Would you ID twice or still play?
At 501, I think I still play it out. Yeah, the points matter too much at this point, I think.
Indeed, and now comes the final one of this here. Suppose you are 5-0-2. Will you ID or will you play for getting those additional 2 points over to the next day?
It depends on who I'm playing against and the matchup. So yeah, it would be very dependent on yeah the as many factors as I can understand. If it's a close matchup, and I think I have an advantage over my opponent, then I might still play it out. But a tournament like this, like you're going to be hitting people at that record, you're going to be hitting people who are very skilled. So it's a very tough call at that point. If it's like if a 50-50 matchup, you don't think you have an advantage, I would ID in that point. At that point in time, because I think the chance that you win this 50-50, like the reward of winning this 50-50 is not high enough to outweigh the downside, which is even if you're gonna miss top 8 by doing this, you could still win thousands of dollars by just making it into day 2 and having a solid run from this point.
Indeed.
So yeah, I would ID at 601.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Or rather at 502, right? So you go into
502,
503.
yeah.
503 would
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
make it in. But in any case, an ID scenario which could happen, Yeah, that's. I think it's also interesting because next day you would then play 3 additional rounds, and the assumption is suppose you move into day 2 with 503, so the minimum point requirements are either 6-2 or 503, tomato at that point, I think. Um, then you play 3 rounds, and then the assumption would be, of course, you then play these 3 rounds. If you win all of them, you have a shot at top cut. That should at least still be possible at that moment. Did you run some numbers on this, perhaps?
Yeah, yeah. So with there's this limitless Swiss calculator, which is a
Yeah.
very useful tool. So we can run some numbers with this
Oh, I got it here.
to.
So give me some numbers, Jake. Show me some
Okay,
math.
yeah. If we're going, you said 1,000 players we
Yeah,
can do
that seems like
at
a
the
good number.
top.
Yeah.
Um, then I think I'd put in 0.01 for the tie rate. At a regionals, this would be a lot higher, but I think at worlds, with a lot of players knowing how to manage time properly, the tie rate should be about 10%.
Oh yeah. So it's
Um, eh,
point one basically, right? Point one.
yeah, 0.1. Yeah,
Yeah.
not 0.01. Sorry.
No
um,
worries. No worries.
yeah, and then for the rounds, you have to hit the custom structure button.
Aha. Yeah. And then
Um,
we see the 3-1 here. Yeah.
Yep. So then you can the 3-1 for the points and the ties, and then you can hit the add phase to
Ooh.
add extra rounds,
Yeah.
or add the phase to the tournament. So
Indeed.
for this one, it'll be 8 rounds with 18 points,
Yeah.
uh,
18 points down
and
there. Yeah.
then add another phase, and then this one will be 3 rounds with 8 players, we can say.
Yeah. Because
Um,
there's a top cut there. Yeah.
Yep. And then once you hit the calculate
Yeah.
button,
And
we
now
should
comes
get.
the big question about this. We enable IDs, right? Because you still would assume people would ID at this point, right?
Yeah, so yeah, keep the IDs checked.
Yeah.
You can test this both checked and unchecked, because in a tournament it'll kind of depend. You'll be able to tell, like, going into day 2 what
Yeah.
this how many
This
people
is
ID'd at 50 whatever 502, but
Yeah, this
um
is interesting. This is interesting. So what this one would give me, just so I can understand this correctly, I look here, 18 points cut off. That's the interesting one. So around 91 players would move into the second phase of the tournament. And then of those, how many points would you need? Oh, look at it. You have 28 points would be rounded up 8 players. Rounded up. And now comes the interesting part of the new system. We have asymmetric top cut. For those who don't know what that means that if you have the same amount of points as the 8th place, you will move into a top cut round. Although to a maximum number of 32 players. Suppose there's going to be a whole boatload of people with the same amount of points. Whether that would happen or not, that's a completely different question, but then suppose that you indeed can move into top cut. That comes with an interesting question, Jake. Suppose you're on day 2. Would you ID for asymmetric top cut, or would you play to win to potentially bypass an asymmetric top cut round and be sure to be in top 8?
Yeah, so I think this question also depends, like, a lot of however much information you can gain at the moment will influence your decision heavily. If you're playing a favorable matchup, you have a very good chance to win, then you're probably playing it out. But at the same time, even if you do win, there's still a chance you will have to play players in that top 16 range, because theoretically, if all of the top 8, all of the top 8 are in, if 16 through 8 are all have the same number of points as the 8th place player, you're going to have to play regardless of what your record is at the end of Swiss. So that's a consideration as well. But then there's also the consideration of prize money and other prizing. So if you're IDing, you're effectively delaying the round that you need to play. So you could play this round right now, or you could play the next round. So if you think you have a good chance to win this current round because of the matchup, then you'll want to play it out. But by IDing, delaying the need to play this round to the next one, you'll lock yourself into the top 16. So you'll be guaranteed prizing. Whereas if you lost this current round, you might even fall out of top 32 potentially, which would be very detrimental.
That is
Um,
indeed
so I
something interesting to think about. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so I think overall, it's going to be correct to ID in that position, just to lock up the top 16 spot, and then you're basically going to play the same game at the next round. You're just guaranteeing yourself a better spot at the end of Swiss to get better prizing in case you lose that asymmetrical top cut round.
That is a good point. So I want to challenge your way of thinking a little bit with presenting you with the following, say, situation, or I hypothesize the following, so to speak. So indeed, first and foremost, it's very well known that the pricing from top 8 to outside top 8 is a significant shift, surely. However, yes, you can ensure yourself some pricing with what you said, IDing. That's fine. But suppose I would like to view this as a sort of a prisoner's dilemma. What do I mean by this? Suppose you have a number of tables where everybody knows if we all ID, we're definitely going to go into asymmetric top cut. If we all do it. And you could see it like this. That ensures your top 16, top 32, whatever. A cut that is not top 8 yet. That could be seen as, say, an okay-ish outcome for everyone. Not bad, but okay-ish. Not super good either. Then you, however, have one or two tables, but just say one right now for illustration. They decide to play. The winner of that table will be off so much better when everybody else IDs. The loser, of course, will be probably all their way out, but also all the people who ID'd could potentially be kicked out of an asymmetric top cut because it could be that that sets the bar higher. So what I'm trying to go for here, I think there's a prisoner's dilemma in the sense that if it's an incentive for one person at all these tables here to play and win rather than everybody IDing. If there's only one, so you can basically, you can mess it up for everybody else. Just by one or two tables of all these. I don't know how many tables this is going to be, but it's definitely going to be a few. Like at least 5 or 6 tables, that's my guess. But can you see what I mean here? This could actually go and be really interesting to study the behavior of the players at this moment.
Yeah, it is. It is a very interesting decision. One of the important things for judges, at least, there is a rule in the rule book that you're not allowed to wait until other matches have concluded or see how other matches are going to make your decision on whether or not you're going to ID or concede or let your opponent concede to you, whatever happens. You're not supposed to wait for other rounds to begin.
Did you just pull the rule book on me?
Yes. So that adds a little bit of a dilemma, but it's because of like matchups. It might be a little bit easier to figure out who's probably going to play it out, if anyone is. So if you know that there's going to be a lopsided matchup somewhere in this this asymmetrical cut IDing into range, and at the same time, them potentially playing would make it so that the point requirement gets higher, then I think everybody's going to be forced to play it out because they are very incentivized to play. Whoever has the favorable matchup is very incentivized to play. And if they win and kick everybody else out, then it's an issue.
This is super interesting.
Yeah. So there's an interesting thing here as well because so I'm not entirely sure how the rules work here as well. But if everybody agrees to ID before the round happens and then somebody plays it out, are they breaking the rules by playing it out? Because I don't know. I don't think they are because they're not waiting for the other rounds but they know how the other rounds are supposed to go. They were lying about how their round is going to go. Yeah, very interesting.
This is definitely going to be very tricky, also from a judge point of view, to call out. And I think my initial take is there are some natural moments where you can ID where it doesn't seem fishy at all, right? Like if we sit before the game, it's very natural that if I play against you and I say, okay, do you want to ID? And I'm IDing at that moment, would not raise any eyebrows. There's nothing wrong here. And we've also seen more often than not, suppose we then decide to play, you say no for an ID. For whatever reason. We play, and then now it's 1-1. Like, I win the first game, you win the second game, and then you go like, do you want to ID now, Stefan? At that point in time, it's also perfectly legit to say ID because you're even again. There are some moments where this is going to be, say, natural. You could also be in that situation. Suppose you have the upper hand in this matchup that we play, but I happen to go 1-0, and then you suddenly, maybe Stefan wants to do an ID now. And then you ask, and that's also, say, a natural moment where an ID can be asked, but it will seem fishy if you see the game next to us, they decide, oh, I lost quickly 2-0, and then suddenly, or whatever, you'll be like, mid-game, do you want an ID now? Ooh, there's these moments where it's going to be a little shady, say, because indeed, like the rulebook says, you're not allowed to just sit there and wait it out and wait for the outcome of other matches. So from a judge point of view, this is going to be, tricky is probably the word, but just difficult. And I think it's going to be a lot of challenging for the judges. It almost feels like the new structure is incentivizing people to play now. That's something.
Yeah. So I think the overall how ties are much worse in day one. Like making day two, you don't no amount of ties will like help you unless you're 503. 503 does help. But we obviously won't have the IDing at 6-2 anymore consideration at all. So that is incentivizing more people to play it out. But I think this does have some implications as far as like slow play goes. So there's a lot of people have argued that this like the ties are so much worse that slow play is not going to be an issue. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case for a few reasons. We could get into them if you want to. But overall, I think the way that the points break down in day two, at most of these thresholds where for getting prizing, like top 32, top 16, or top 8, actually really top 32 and top 8 are the main ones where this is true, is that it seems that the way that the numbers work out for most player numbers and most natural tie numbers, like the overall tie rate of the tournament, that it'll be an even multiple of 3 that'll get you into these different cuts. So and it looks like it's also whatever the top 8 point record is, one game loss below that will get you top 32. So if top cut is 30 match points, then top 32 seems to work out to be about 27 a lot of the time. But depending on the player numbers, it can be true that the number will be like 26 and 29 for top cut. These types of things, or like that. So at that point, getting a bunch of ties is much better. So like people will have to be paying really close attention to the player counts at tournaments and the tie numbers because the way asymmetrical cut changes things, it sort of incentivizes people to like adapt mid-tournament to what their strategy is, whether getting ties or not is going to be correct depending on how everyone else is doing in the field, and sort of same thing with the top 32. But at the top 32, there's no asymmetrical, so you will be incentivized to play that rather than try to be on the bubble with the 26 points when 27 would get you in, or those types of things.
I think that's really, really interesting also to hear these thoughts about this, because, well, this is exactly also what we saw at regular events. Like, we've seen these ways of thinking and this situation, and evidently it will change a bit, sure, but this is a very good point, starting point to also get what we can expect to happen. And indeed, one thing you point out that I think is really interesting, indeed, we need to see how it develops through an event with the amount of ties. It could just be there are naturally a high amount of ties at a given event, even though ties are perceived as worse now, or perceived, they are just worse, strictly speaking. But that still would not mean that there could be events where there's just a lot of natural ties. It could just be the games naturally come to a 1-1 standing, or for whatever reason you didn't even finish the first game. All these kind of things can still happen. And that also means you as a player, that's something you need to really keep a closer eye now on. How is this tie rate throughout the event progressing? And is the tie rate in the bottom tables, or is it in the higher tables? Because it doesn't matter too much if all the bottom tables after round 5 start tying. That doesn't really have many implications. But more if all the top tables, for whatever reason, starts tying after round 5, that becomes very interesting how this is going to play out. So I think there's a lot of factors here, and it's a really interesting take. One thing I think we should not forget, about Worlds specifically, that could mess up all these calculations that I still have on screen from the Limitless calculator, is we do have a lot of round 1 buys. And what do you think will be the effect of these? I think outside Asia, it's at least 56. Some people out there may know what the true number is, but it's definitely 56 or higher. What would that do? What do you think would that
Yeah,
do?
so I think this has the potential to sort of put the top cut up by probably only 1 point. Like it shouldn't be more than 1 point higher than it would naturally be. But I think that is something that makes this quite interesting because yeah, with a lot more people starting off with wins, it's like lopsided more. That there will be more winners than losers, which means that you have to sort of keep track of how the points are adjusting. Because if those players all start losing immediately for whatever reason, it's unlikely because they're the best players in the world that have got the round 1 buys. But if they all do poorly, then it'll have no impact on the structure. But if they are the ones who are doing really well, then it could push the point total that you need to make top cut or top 16 or top 32 higher. So it won't matter for you qualifying for day 2 of Worlds, but in day 2, it could change the amount of points that you need to be able to win the tournament or get whatever prizing you want.
I think that's yeah, interesting, and I think that also puts a good point to it's just we just have to wait and see, right? And indeed, it could be that all these people who got a round 1 bye, that they all just lose afterwards. Who knows? We don't know, but there's only one way to figure out, and that's definitely going to be interesting to see. I think there's also a good point to round to an end, but just for a final thing, Jake. So after looking at this for a while now, a few days or some days at least since it was announced, have your initial take on this changed? Are you somewhat positive or negative on these changes in general?
Yes, I think I've sort of stuck with my initial impressions. For Worlds, I don't think like this changed my personal strategy going into Worlds either way. I was probably going to play like at Worlds, you're more incentivized to play a risky deck regardless because you're up against the best players in the world, so you're not going to just have an advantage in skill over beating them with like a solid deck. It's better to take risks, and we've seen many times in past World Championships that the risk takers do well with crazy rogue decks and whatnot. But for regionals, I think this will definitely change my approach for deck choice. I'll be less incentivized to just pick the solid deck, more incentivized to take risk. But I also think that overall this is going to make it a little bit more luck based to whether or not the best players finish higher. So yeah, one of the issues with Pokemon is that, or not issues, one of the differences between Pokemon and something like chess is that the game is not entirely skill based. There's an element of luck in it. And an element of luck in both the games, how they play out, and also matchups, which matchups you hit. So the more rounds that go on, the higher likelihood it is for these unlikely results to happen, or they'll get evened out over the course of time. But with fewer rounds, it means that there's more pressure on each individual round. So, for example, if you had one like dead hand, like double brick in one matchup in your 15 rounds, that was 1/15 of your tournament.
Yeah.
But if you're playing 12 rounds, that's 1/12 of your tournament. Yeah. So that's a much bigger share, which makes it harder to come back from a bad event like that.
So basically, consistency is king still.
Yeah.
That's just thanks for this take, and also thank you for all the other takes here for today. And now the question is, so you're saying you should play a risky deck, so so you're playing Future Box as well, as I can hear. 4 Iron Hands, right? That's the play.
Yeah, definitely not.
I would like to thank you for being here for this class in Stefan's classroom, Jake. And yeah, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for staying up late. And I wish you the best of luck at Worlds.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Anytime. And for everybody listening out there, thanks for making it to the end. And thanks for watching this class in Stefan's classroom. I hope to see you back for another class in Stefan's classroom. Bye-bye.